was yesterday, a little nicer.
Oh, yeah.
But thanks for coming. The raindrops are falling on our heads today. I heard 66, a temperature with the 6 in it on Friday, so we'll hope that happens here for the weekend, next weekend. But thanks for coming. It's kind of crash course on shrub class today. We'll try to cover as much as we can. I'll show you some pictures. We'll do mostly spring, mention a few summer things. As you know, I do way too many classes here, so we'll have hydrangeas and another rose class and some specific ones coming up here in the coming weeks. So we'll kind of touch on probably everything but those, but certainly give them a mention. Everyone grab the handout back there. So we've got a little copy, some light reading at bedtime, as I always say. There's quite a bit on there. So we will get going. I'm Trevor, our general manager here. And I borrowed a bunch of catchphrases from one of my growers that I love. Get your shrub on. They got all kinds of funny ones. The next one, get twiggy with it's even better.
I like that.
So today, again, we're going to talk a little bit about spring and summer bloomers. A little bit of evergreen, a little bit of deciduous, some things that lose their leaves. We need kind of all the above in our landscapes to give a little variety. You know, my yard is always about, we're not going to turn this into landscape design, but kind of layering and contrast and color and foliage and a lot of other aspects too. So it will not just be bloomers, but we'll also talk a little bit of fun spring foliage. A big thing for me in all the classes is hopefully in this one you take home the right shrub for the right spot in the yard. We want to sell people success here at Sunnyside, so hopefully we'll get you the right plant to put where you're looking to plant it. We always kind of talk about these funny words. I hear customers like, what does it mean about a foundation plant or a specimen or this or that? So again, without getting too crazy in the landscape design, you know, so maybe the structure plants, we'll call them, the foundation shrubs. You know, what do we have along the house that'll kind of soften the house a little bit? Specimens to me is one, you know, maybe a little bit larger plant or a smaller one, but something that's like, ooh, I really like that there, and then I can put other things around it, you know, to kind of pop. And then we all have borders, you know, there's lots of low shrubs. Perennials is another option that we would have kind of in lower areas around the landscape as well. But big thing with me, again, is layering. You know, look at heights, look at colors. You know, my yard's not your yard. Your yard's not mine. I might like different things than you like in your place. I love yellow foliage. I love irrigation, big leaf, small leaf, a little bit of everything. So if you can kind of look at some of the examples, you can use a little bit of those principles when you're picking out your shrubs. So getting twiggy with it. You know, what kind of shape and structure are you looking for? We'll see things that are more upright, multi-stemmed. We'll see things that are very small that can be sheared. You know, kind of think about in your mind, you know, everybody, I don't like ice cubes and triangles and different prune things. You may like a little bit more formal landscape. So kind of consider some of these. Can I prune it? Can I not prune it? What's it going to turn into if I kind of let it grow? A big factor is how fast or slow does it grow. You know, I like slow and steady things to go natural. You may want to hide the neighbor's garbage can or something a little different, and you may want it to grow a little bit faster. So we can talk about that. A big one to me is maintenance down the road. You know, can it be pruned? Can it not be pruned? You know, and again, we're not going to delve into a huge pruning seminar. We do a few of those, but a big thing to me is the next piece there. Does it bloom on old wood or new wood? And that's a huge factor in how you would prune it, how you would maintain it, and when you would do that. So if everyone's not kind of familiar with that, that would just mean any plant, does it grow new growth that season and bloom immediately, or do I have to leave last year's growth alone so that I get the flower next year? Is that kind of making sense to everybody? So if you think about like a magnolia, we walked out this winter, we saw buds on our magnolia that opened the next year. Other plants like a rose, we can cut down to pretty much nothing here coming out of winter, and everything that grows that year is going to bloom immediately. So that's kind of two examples. A big one we talk always about is it's raining sideways today, and we have another wet winter, is drainage. You know, there's going to be a lot of things that will take a little bit more wet, some other things that will not. So be real careful with your soil. Is it clay? Does it drain? Does the water puddle up? And then again, we can get the right plant for the right place. And hopefully, again, you know, what is your style? Just because I like it doesn't mean you have to. So what, you know, what do you like in your yard? You know, what do you want to accomplish with this shrub as well? So I always throw a couple kind of websites out. You know, there's a lot of information on the internet. I'd be real careful just kind of searching with random sites. You know, go to a reputable grower, somewhere the nurseries buy from. Two great examples are those two. Monrovia, you know, is the master grower across the whole country. They ship nationwide. You're going to put in your zone, your zip code, and you can look through hundreds of options of things and varieties of such online and get accurate information and real pictures. Sometimes I cruise the internet and I'm like, wow, that's not even the right color. So be real careful kind of where you're looking at them. The second one to me is Bailey Nurseries. They have a program called First Edition Shrubs. I think some of the nicest breeding that we get out every year. There's always new introductions through this First Editions program. That's a place in Minnesota. They grow in Oregon. They're very hardy. You know, a lot of times very simple. We're not talking about crazy things that are marginally hardy around here, which sometimes on Monrovia, you got to be careful with zones. They'll tell you we're zone 8. I would always stay with 7 to be careful. That's a tough one here. Anything zone 8 in my yard, that is a doornail again this winter, so we'll get it replaced again this year. And I'll try to tell myself, get something zone 7 instead. So if we talk, you know, kind of some spring bloomers, we'll kind of start with sun and part shade. So what I mean by that is at least afternoon sun, hopefully, and all day sun is fine. These are things that can take full sun locations in the yard and not have to be shaded at all. Certainly if you have morning sun, you know, up till 1 or 2 o'clock, it's not the end of the world. We could still use a lot of these things. But think of these as kind of the hot spots in the yard, maybe where we get a little hotter, drier locations, okay? So some things I'm not going to talk a lot about today because we have a huge rhododendron festival here. Azalea Rhododendron class is just 2 weeks out. We'll have a trust show out here with the Rhododendron Society chapter. It's a great day if you want to come down. So I'm not going to talk a lot about our rhodies. That's an easy plant in Western Washington. We all have rhododendrons, I hope. We all have azaleas. And we all probably have a camellia in the yard. If not, we know what those 3 things are. So don't forget about those 3. They're all useful. I'll tell you today, with the shrub class, you guys will get 20% on it for shrub purchases. But I've never in my life, in 30 years doing this, put rhodies and azaleas on sale in the spring. It's part of our anniversary specials we're trying to run all month. So today is the last day, 30% off all the fresh rhododendron azaleas. So if you need any of that, I'd go out maybe in the rain and do a little shopping real quick after class. Because today is the last day of that sale. We've had it running for about a week. So we look at some other goodies. I don't know if any of you have used California lilac or ceanothus. You know, sometimes it gets a little nipped here in cold winters. We prune it back. It flushes out new leaves, and then we bloom on new wood on that one. So we do get quite a few ceanothus in. That's an evergreen. It's at the top of the drought tolerance scale. If I had a hot, dry, sunny bank, an area that I don't want to water much, that's usually a great choice. Be careful on the variety. There's some that will probably bury your garage if you let them go for years and years. There's other ones that are a little bit smaller. So I always think of the Edmonds Ferry Dock, the terminal down there. I think the Victoria ceanothus is probably 12 feet by 12 feet. And it's been there a long time, but it's awful big. That might be a little big for some landscapes. We do Dark Star, we do Julia Phelps. There's a lot of other good options here for varieties that are a little bit tidier, and they're very, very easy to prune too, okay? Flowering currants just in bloom right now. That's a deciduous one, a great native style shrub. The hummingbirds will love you for having those here in April when they're blooming. That's a great early nectar source for our hummingbirds as they're coming back into the landscape. But flowering currant, we still have some out there, and that's a really showy early bloomer. Again, a pretty good sized plant. You'll see on the list, but certainly something that we can prune after bloom, let it regrow, and then we have our buds again for next year. That's not one we would cut back in the winter. We'll cut off the majority of our flowers on there. Lots of lilacs around. You know, I was lucky to inherit a couple 20-foot lilacs in my yard in Everett when I purchased it years and years ago. Lots of options there. Whites, pinks, blues, lavenders. Everybody likes dark purple. That's an easy one. Always good fragrance. You know, and this is one of those things that gives it a shrub or a tree. You know, I've seen lilacs in my yard look like small trees. You can certainly prune them back to keep them like shrubs. That's a picture of traditional French lilac, which is, I think, what most people think of for cutting in the landscape. Maybe look at some of the other options out there. We still get great fragrance. We've still got some color options, but there's a lot of good dwarf ones now that maybe you haven't seen. We got quite a bit again coming back in this week. We have some out there right now. from Miss Kim to the bloomerangs, which actually bloom twice a year. If I want bloom now and then again late summer, fall, that's a smaller option. Miss Kim, Korean lilacs. We get one called Tinkerbell. It's a nice pink one. But there's a lot of shrubbier dwarf lilacs. Maybe I could have something 4, 5, 6 feet and not 10, 12, 15 feet down the road if that's a little big for your landscape, okay? But good sun, and make sure, again, these are old wood bloomers on that, so don't prune those till after they flower in May, June. We can tidy them up, and then we set our flower buds to have for the next year. Mock orange is kind of the same way. That's an old school one. I think my grandmother had one of those that did bury about half the garage as it got large. If you've had old-fashioned mock orange, you know, that's a big, tall, arching shrub. So incredible fragrance, very hardy, easy to grow. It is deciduous, turns yellow in the fall. But again, you know, for us here at Sunnyside, we're not carrying a lot of old-fashioned, overgrown mock oranges. Not to insult any old mock oranges. We got a lot of dwarf stuff around. So from a new one like Illuminati Tower that stays narrower, we get Snowbell, we get Snow White, we get one called Blizzard. Now we're back down to like my size, you know, a nice little 5, 6 foot plant that's a little bit more manageable in the landscape. So look at a lot of the dwarf ones out there if you like old-fashioned mock orange. Osmanthus is in bloom right now, a little evergreen plant, super fragrant, little white flowers if you haven't tried that one. Osmanthus can get pretty big, that's up to you. Very easy plant to prune. I could have this clipped almost like a boxwood hedge that blooms. Go a little taller for a hedge, or use it as a shrub in my yard. The other nice thing with osmanthus is, in all honesty, you could probably grow just about anywhere. I've seen osmanthus thrive in pretty much total shade all the way to total sun. So that's a plant maybe to use in a few different spots in your yard. I think everybody knows pieris. Some people call that lily of the valley shrub. They're all been blooming here for a month. We're just starting to get all the colorful new leaves out on those. We got some beautiful ones out there for sale. I just bring pieris up because I think most people know it. And again, we get some old school ones, you know, mountain fire, forest flame. We can pick white flower, pink flower, red new growth, dark purple new growth, different colors. But maybe look at some of the newer ones, because there's a lot of great pieris now that might only get 2 or 3 feet tall, or 4 or 5 feet tall, and not, you know, again, 6, 8 feet down the road like I see in a lot of older yards. So lots of good options for new pieris out there.
Can I say something about pieris?
Yeah.
Our plants are just quivering with pollinators.
Okay.
All the little trees.
Yeah.
All the
Great little early bloomer.
so
Yeah.
nice early
Yep.
source.
Yeah. You know, and I'll say this, me personally, I like pieris. I have a couple in my yard. I hear some customers like, yeah, I've had that, I don't want it again. A, it's a great early pollinator, and B, you know, that's a plant we can get variegated leaves, we get a little added interest with foliage, but if we look at the buds, you know, that's a plant that sends its flower buds out of the plant in like June, July. So I love them in the fall, winter, because spring's coming, you sit there and see those flower buds all through the winter, and then wham, the first sun we get, in March, they open up, and then we've got some early color going. Okay? So a couple deciduous things. So spirea is probably a plant most people are familiar with. I think we probably have 12, 15 kinds of spirea out there. That's a really easy to grow shrub. We can shear it. It blooms on new wood. Very easy to grow up here with a lot of foliage color and some different flower options as well. Maybe look at spirea for kind of one of those no-brainer plants. We can clip it low. We can let it get a little bigger depending on the variety. And this is one that'll take a little more wet, which I think some people that maybe struggle in the winter with a little bit wetter soil, the spirea loves a little bit of moisture. So that's one that we can put not in a bog, not on the pond, but certainly an area that maybe doesn't drain quite as well as some other spots in the yard. Viburnum's a great shrub. You know, that's a huge family of shrubs, from small to evergreen to deciduous. We could probably have a class on viburnum shrubs alone. If you talk from snowball bush, you know, to double file viburnum, which is the picture of that one, our big lace cap flowers, you know, cranberry bush, we have evergreen spring bouquet, we've got spirit, we've got viburnum David eyes, a real common big leafed evergreen one. Lots of options there to explore for sure. On the deciduous ones, again, we bloom on old wood, so we don't want to prune those back, but certainly a really nice flower display come spring. An excellent fall color. That's a plant that's always in my fall color class. We've got great reds, great purples, nice bright colors in the fall as they change and then drop for the winter time. Deutzia is a kind of another old-fashioned plant that growers have reinvented and I think given it new life. I don't know that I sold any Deutzia to anybody 20 years ago. Now we get quite a few Deutzia in again because it is a very nice spring blooming plant. Now we've added in some foliage color. You know, we've got some nice color on it for contrast and a much tidier habit. So this is one in the picture there is called Chardonnay Pearls. I've got lime green to yellow foliage and those white strings of flowers. We've got other ones out there that'll bloom pink as well. So we can get a little bit of foliage color now on those, and I think again a much tidier structure if you like old-fashioned Deutzia. I probably won't spend much time. I think everybody knows Forsythia. Those have been in bloom here for a little while, bright yellow in spring. I would just say this on Forsythia, don't be bashful on your pruning. So make sure you cut that thing back after it flowers and you don't have to have a mess of Forsythia. You can keep it much tidier, and as long as I leave that wood that grows each year, that's what blooms the next season. So I can maximize my flower, whack it back to nothing, let it start over again, and you can kind of play that game each season. Excuse me, Mexican orange or choicea, we just started getting a lot of that back in. That's going to be evergreen and going to give you some fragrance. So that's like a May, June bloomer. It's always white. We can do green foliage. We can do lime foliage to yellow foliage. Even some cut leaf varieties of that now. I think we've got all of them in out there for sale this time of year. That's one, again, we would get some smell in that May, June, but also have a nice evergreen that we can last through the winter. That's a plant up here, you know, again, speaking for me, I live right in Everett. You know, on a cold winter, maybe I get a little bit of tip damage on it sometimes with the cold. We cut it back a little bit in the spring. Here it comes back up with fresh, colorful leaves, and then we still bloom. So that's one that we would get on the new growth as well. I think one of the prettiest flowering plants that maybe most people haven't discovered. Who's got a mountain laurel? Anybody got mountain laurel in their yard? You know, that's one, if you look at that picture, that's just one example. But that's an eastern native, kind of like rhododendron, like similar conditions, but it can take a lot more sun, and they're very drought tolerant too, unlike rhododendron. That's a really intricate flower. We get a lot of these in this time of year, and then we can find none in the summer, fall, winter. So this is the time to shop for Kalmia if you like them. But I could pick a bud color and a bloom color, and if I want spotting or striping, those are almost like little paintings when they bloom. We've got a pretty good variety out there with picture tags, and you can say, wow, that's got white with maroon stripes in it, or red with the little pink stars in it. I mean, you can get some really pretty interesting flowers on Kalmia or the mountain laurel as well. We just got our pearl bush in. That's one of my old-fashioned favorites. You know, if you like the white and the big string of pearls blooming, was a hard plant to come by. It still kind of is. I think they gave me 10. We order a bunch of those, and we always end up with maybe only 10 plants every year. That's not a one a lot of people grow, but certainly one if you like something a little different. The Exochorda or the pearl bush is going to give me an interesting white little flower there come springtime. Quince is all in bloom right now. You know, we can do double orange, double red, double pink, double peach. There's a lot of color options out there on old-fashioned quince. We don't get much of the old ones in anymore. We get that new series for Improving Winters called Double Take. It's got a lot less thorns on it. If you've got quince, you know what I mean. They get some pretty nasty thorns on those, on the old ones. And they sucker and get pretty big. These are much tidier, I think a little easier to grow in a modern landscape, and a lot less blood when you're out there pruning them. We got a little less thorns on there. But another one of my favorites, I don't know if anyone's grown Itea or Sweet Spire. That's a plant I wish more people purchase because I think that's a shrub that shines in multiple seasons. If that's a picture when they're blooming there in May, June, I've got white flowers, super fragrant again. That's got great smell to it. And that turns like a burning bush red in the fall, but doesn't lose its leaves typically right away. So to me, that's one that's a nice, tidy plant, great fragrance and bloom, and then bright fall color that I get to enjoy. By the time winter's over, we've lost most of our leaves. We pull a few off of there, and then we start over again. So again, most of the sweet spires now have kind of funny names like Love Child, a bunch of little small, tiny ones now. We don't have to get the old-fashioned sweet spire. But certainly one to consider for the yard. And again, another plant that'll take a little bit of wet. You know, that's one I think people would be okay with a little bit of wet, especially in the wintertime. Weigelia is one that some people ask for. Who asks for Wiglia? We don't mind if you ask for Wiglia. Usually that speaks to all of us. But that's another one, you know, that kind of brings me back to my childhood. My parents, my grandmother, we had old Weigelias around that, again, buried the garage as they grew. Big, huge, arching plants that bloomed really nice, but kind of got a little big and out of control. We don't carry any of those anymore. We get a lot of varieties of Weigelia in. Dark foliage, variegated foliage, gold foliage, green foliage. We've got some great options. And then our flowers, we don't do a lot of white, but all kinds of shades of pink to kind of a lipstick red. You can probably tell from the shape of that flower, that is a great pollinator magnet. When those are blooming, the bees are buzzing all over the place in April, May, late April, May, June. A lot of these get hummingbird action as well. It's a great nectar and tube flower for a lot of our pollinators around here. If we fast forward, watch your tags on a lot of these, because a lot of these will repeat flower now, and I won't just have May, June, but I would have bloom again in that late summer, early fall time as well. So these are old wood bloomers. We got to be careful not to cut them back too hard in the winter. This is one we would let them bloom, and then we would prune it back to tidy it up a little bit if we need to. But if you know Weigelia, or we'll call it Wiglia because that sounds more fun. If you know Wiglia, and you have, I've had one before, this is a little different than the old one. So very tidy shape. I don't know that you'll have to prune a lot of these like you used to on some old-fashioned ones. You know, as an example, I don't know how many out there have the word wine in the name, but let's see, we have fine wine, I think there's finer wine, wine and roses, spilled wine, tiny wine. So you can pick, I've got dark leaves, hot flower, but I could just have a little, you know, 2 foot by 3 foot or 3 foot by 4 foot. I can kind of pick the size for my landscape by choosing the right variety, okay? If we do a little bit for more of that part shade location, and that's gonna be, again, maybe that morning sun where I've got sun up till noon or so, but then I've got some protection late in the afternoon. These are things that might not thrive in all afternoon sun kind of thing. If we look at a few, the Daphnes, you know, Daphnes are in bloom right now, fragrant flowers. As long as I have good drainage, that's the opposite of a couple of things we've talked about today. If I've got wet, I've got clay, don't do Daphne. You're going to be disappointed like I was in a couple places. We have to have good drainage with Daphne plants. But that's going to give me evergreen foliage, super fragrant flower. So there's a lot of good Daphnes out there, but for the part shade one, these winter Daphnes, which really bloom in early spring, but winter Daphnes, what they're called, or Daphne odora, that would give me a nice variegated leaf, and then again, a great fragrant flower here as we get into that March, April, early May time frame. On the right there's Leucothaway, and that's kind of a native style shrub. We have Coast Leucothaway growing out in lots of places in Washington, Oregon, British Columbia. Coast Leucothaway is going to give me an evergreen plant, something I can clip if I want, but pretty tidy, you know, maybe 3 foot tall or so if we let them go for a few years. But I've got some great colorful foliage. That's one I can get reds on. I can get kind of orangey tones on. But I'm going to have some nice new growth color and then a really pretty little white flower as we get into May as well. That's a plant I think is perfect for that part sun, part shade location if I'm looking for a nice evergreen that's easy that I can use as a nice foundation plant. Oregon grape would be another native. You know, those are blooming here right now in all shapes and sizes. There's some pretty fun cultivars of Oregon grape or Mahonias out there these days. Another one, great for the early pollinators, great for the hummingbirds. The reason I have a few in my yard is to keep the hummingbird happy here as we go through late winter and through springtime. But Oregon grape's a great native. I mean, if you're trying to go kind of native and stay with stuff that just grows around here, that would be a great option for a shrub that we have a few different forms of. Sarcococa, won't make anybody spell that. Sometimes it's easier to just think of sweet box. A lot of people call that sweet box. So very heavy fragrance. You drive up to kind of old neighborhoods, particularly Everett, Seattle's got a lot of this up in the shade. You'll just roll down your window, you know, in March and go, God, what's that smell in the air? It smells like sweet vanilla. So great fragrance on that. This one we can do for deep dark shade or part shade. Super drought tolerant. This is one I use in my own yard for underneath eaves in the shade and areas that I don't water much. That's a great, easy plant for evergreen, and again, the fragrant kind of late winter to spring flower. Winter hazel. Ours is just blooming out here on the road. As you're leaving, if you head south on Sunnyside, you'll see the big one out in front of the house in full bloom right now. But Coreolopsis, or not witch hazel, but winter hazel, is Coreolopsis, and that's one that will give me yellow flowers on a deciduous shrub. It's kind of the perfect little woodland garden plant. I'm looking for a, 4 or 5 foot specimen that leaves out, blooms, and then leaves out afterwards that I can enjoy in that kind of morning sun area. And Skimmia is probably one you've seen a little bit in the gardens. That's an evergreen, pretty low maintenance. Again, I can do that in deep shade, part shade, even with some sun on it. It's pretty easy. We just have to be careful with Skimmia that we get a he and we get a she, and let those two do their thing, and then I get berries on the she if you would like berries in the garden as well. We also have a self-fertile Skimmia out there called Reeves Skimmia. If I just want to plant one plant, enjoy that flower coming out of winter, and then get the little red berries on there as we go through the season. I put one camellia up there just to remind you, again, we got lots of cool camellias in. That's one that really to get in the fall, winter, early spring. We don't have access to camellias at all in the summer months, to be honest with you. The best selection is always going to be kind of September, October, and March, April. And once I'm sold out, I have to wait till the next fall to replenish kind of thing. So don't forget about camellias. We can do winter bloomers or spring bloomers. These are easy to prune. I think they're great plants for pots. A lot of people ask me, I'm looking for something evergreen I can put in like a part shade container. I want it there all year. What would last a long time in a container? Camellia is a great choice for a little shrub plant to grow in a pot as well. The last one there for kind of part shades, Fothergilla, and that's a plant I wish, kind of one of my personal faves, I wish more people bought. We get some in every year. Wish we sold more of them, because this is a great plant, I think, for the Northwest. I like things that provide interest in multiple seasons myself. I don't think just a flash in the pan and I'm moving on to the next thing. So Fothergilla's got a great little flower in May that smells good again, got great fragrance. It looks native-y to me, and it's got unbelievable fall color. That's one of the top 5 fall color plants, I think, in the fall. So a manageable size shrub, maybe to think about adding to the garden for sure. Now, if we talk just a little bit of summer bloomers, again, I'm going to skip rose discussion today. We have a rose class coming up here again. I think it's first weekend of June. But it's an easy answer to me. You come in here to the nursery and you ask me or our staff, I want a shrub that blooms all summer long that grows in full sun. Sweet, buy a rose. I hate to tell you, it's as simple as that. There's not a lot of stuff that's going to flower week after week, month after month until frost. Buy a rose. That's an easy choice. That's going to give me color from mid-May all the way till frost. If I feed it and I take care of it, you're going to have happy roses and a lot of flower power through the summer, okay? Second one is hydrangea. Just about a few weeks away for hydrangea class. But again, if you come to me and say, I want a shrub that blooms all summer, hydrangea's the one. Whether we're talking shade hydrangeas or this, PG hydrangeas for sun. I start blooming in late May, June. I've got flower power all the way till we get frost in the fall. Those are the 2 main things that don't stop blooming. The rest of this stuff, 6 to 8 weeks, some leaves, maybe I repeat later on some, but nothing is ever going to beat a rose or a hydrangea shrub for the length of flower. So a few other things here for sun. So Abelia is a plant that I would have late summer flower on. Again, great for the pollinators. The bees go crazy on these in August, September, and early October. A lot of times they're fragrant. The biggest thing I would say with the Abelia is look at your foliage options. There's some unbelievable new Abelias in that will give me lovely variegated foliage. Whether I like white, pink, green, or you're like me and you like your hot orange, yellow, kind of red color tones. You can do either way with Abelia, but a really easy plant to grow that's typically evergreen up here. If it does lose its leaves, we can always clip it back a little bit in spring, up it comes again, and then we still have our flower as we get to late summer. Now, butterfly bush is probably one we could have in the perennials or the shrub class. It's still butterfly bush if you ask me, but now they call it nectar bush or summer lilac, makes me laugh. So this is, again, pollinator, hummingbird, butterfly, obviously, super fragrant. Nothing is different with butterfly bush with modern ones versus old, except one thing. They don't produce seed. Butterfly bush is illegal in the state of Washington, luckily, finally, because they seed all over our native plants. So the varieties you'll see at a place like Sunnyside are seedless. That's the only reason we're able to sell them here. I'm very careful on which ones we bring in. They don't produce seed, but I still get the exact same flower, exact same fragrance. I can choose some different growth habits. There's some that are very low. Other ones I could get 5 or 6 feet tall if we wanted to, okay? We've got crepe myrtle. That's a plant, if you would have asked me 10 years ago, I would have never shown anybody on a slideshow. I go down to Oregon a lot for business, and I see crepe myrtle blooming in the summer. They're fabulous. God, why can't we have those in Washington? Because we were never warm enough. I hardly ever saw crepe myrtle bloom. They would grow. They would turn pretty color in the fall, but they would hardly ever bloom up here. I think now that we're just that 5 degrees warmer in those hot spells we get in August, that's a pretty cool plant. So we can grow that as a small tree even, or shrub, and I can pick all sorts of flowers on crepe myrtle. Super drought tolerant, deciduous up here, not evergreen. If you're from the south, we lose our leaves up here. They don't stay evergreen like they do down Alabama, Mississippi, and the southeast a little bit. But really cool bark too. That's a fun plant. You may decide, I'm in for a crepe myrtle. We don't have them in quite yet, but this is something we have over the late spring and the summer months to give you a little extra summer flower. Escallonia is one. Maybe some of you have grown. That's a common kind of beekeeper plant because the bees, again, go crazy on Escallonia when they bloom in the summer. I'm always brutally honest in classes. I think you take a chance with Escallonia the farther away from the water you live. I've already had a number of people come in and say my Escallonia died down to the ground or got some serious winter damage with the cold spells we get, because Escallonia is right on that kind of hardy line up here. So if we've got hot sun, you've got good drainage, you live maybe in a little sheltered microclimate or towards the water, that's an excellent hedge for summer bloom or a specimen plant if you like the bees. Great light pink flower and very drought tolerant as well. The Hebes, that's another one. I have a few Hebes left in my yard in Everett after all these years. Many of these get a little bit of damage. Be real careful which Hebe you choose to grow. It is a fun plant for foliage and for flower. We've got a lot of choice out there, but really look, we only carry a few out in our shrub yard that I would feel comfortable with you having year to year to year. We sell other Hebes in our annual department that are kind of fun to tuck in pots or something that may not fare so well over that winter. So look at your tag real careful and pay attention to your zone. There's a lot of zone 8 Hebes. There's a lot of zone 7 Hebes. There's very few zone 6 Hebes, which are the ones that I would try to grow as a shrub, okay? On the side there is PG hydrangea, so that just gives you an idea of the size of the flower. Those are big cone blooms that bloom all summer. They're always gonna open lime green or white and then fade to light pink, medium pink, dark pink, and almost towards red as we get towards fall. So you'll have a nice variety of color on there. They don't turn blue. We're not doing any of that like other hydrangeas. But this is one that blooms on new wood. So it's really easy to flower or to prune. You can do whatever you want pruning it to keep it down. And there's a huge number of choices. So you could tell me, I want 4 foot, I want 5 foot, I want 8 feet, I want a big old specimen hydrangea. And you can get these as a tree, grown up as a trunk with a cute little tree on top. It's really a nice size flowering tree for most landscapes in sun. Rock roses, you know, again, one of those kind of heavy plants that's right on the borderline. I see plenty of rock roses live year to year as I drive around, but be careful your location and which one you choose, because rock rose would be, again, top of the list for drought tolerance, easy to grow, crappy soil. You know, there's a lot of good things about rock rose, but it has to be well drained, full sun, and just be careful of the variety you choose to make sure we're a little bit on the hardier side. Beautyberry is one that's going to bloom in the summer, and then I get those, I call them husky berries, sorry to the cougars. We get those purple berries on there always in the fall. That's a really showy plant for like that fall, midsummer bloom, and then we get the really attractive berries as we get towards fall. Excuse me. Now, a few things more for sun and summer. The Caryopteris is going to bloom blue. There's not a lot of things that have blue flowers on it up here. That would lose its leaves. Kind of a low shrub. We get a few of these in. They're just leafing out right now. But this would be like a late July, August, September time frame. Drought tolerant again. I don't know that I'd grow it as a shrub. I think that's a little woodier plant that would make a nice addition to a nice pollinator garden or a typical summer garden where you can mix with other perennials as well. On the right there, I think, is the best Daphne. I have one in my yard called Eternal Fragrance. We sell a lot of these all season long. But if I want fragrance, I want flower, I've got good drainage, and I've got sun or part sun to grow it in, that Eternal Fragrance Daphne blooms about 8 months. So the first flowers are out right now, and then I get more leaves, and then I bloom again, and then I get more leaves, and I bloom again. And you just keep blooming off and on through the entire season. Typically, it's like a March all the way to November for flowers. So that's a long time for bloom with good smell as well. Hardy gardenias. You know, another one 10 years ago I thought would never exist up here for our customers. But they keep getting better and better with hardy gardenias that we can actually grow in the ground in our yards. So this is one, if we've got sun, we've got really good drainage again, not wet, and we fertilize a lot. Gardenias are really heavy feeders. A lot of people get yellow foliage, off color, they don't bloom as much. Keep the fertilizer on them. That's one I'd feed 3 or 4 times over the course of the spring to midsummer versus once on a rhododendron kind of thing. So keep the food on them, and I'll get great white flower, great fragrance, and a really healthy, nice, hardy type gardenia. The other one there is Hypericum. So it's not the ground cover we call St. John's wort, but shrubby Hypericums. You know, these are plants not in yet because they're just leafing out, but as we get into summer, these are ones we can get nice flower and that real big berry on them. So always attractive in late summer, fall. We can choose orange, red, yellow, black, white, pink. You can pick any color berry you like. A lot of folks like using those cut in arrangements and things. So that's maybe a little different shrub to try. Potentilla is one, I wouldn't use the word indestructible with very many plants, but there's an indestructible one, bulletproof. So cinquefoil or potentilla grows all the way up into the Arctic Circle. So super hardy, it's easy to grow, drought tolerant, loves sun. This is one we can grow in a lot of sunny, hot places in our yard. If you like, I can do white, I can do pink, or I can find all kinds of shades in that yellow to orange, marmalade to almost red, kind of a scarlet color. So potentilla is one kind of a no-brainer plant. If you like a little summer color and a little shrub, that's a really easy plant to grow. I've always liked Rose of Sharon. You know, that's our hardy hibiscus. Althea, it's got a bunch of different names to it. But that's a specimen to me. If I'm buying a Rose of Sharon, I want one nice big plant to enjoy in the summertime. These are ones that won't even bloom until July, August, September, as we get into late summer. I can do blue, lavender, pinks, violets, kind of all those pastel colors, no orange, no yellow, no red. You got to move to Hawaii for the tropical hibiscus. But we can do a lot of the altheas, the hardy roses Sharons up here, double flower or single. This is one we go through a lot of these in the summer. So wait a little bit. We'll have trees and shrubs available. We have a few in so far. But again, I have one in my yard. They're just leafing out right now, and we'll get more and more as they become available. A few things for shade. You know, again, I'm not going to talk a lot about hydrangea because we've got those coming up in a few weeks. But that is the best, longest blooming, all summer, round or lace cap flower hydrangea. If I've got a part shade or a shade garden, we would want to go straight for hydrangea for length of bloom. A few other things. Maybe calycanthus, if you can see that flower. This is allspice, kind of a plant you don't see around a lot. But I think a pretty useful plant, even with a little wet again, or that midsummer bloom. It does have a nice fragrance to it, but it's kind of a maroon burgundy type flower, a little bit different for flower. On the right there is Symphyocarpus. So we have native things like snowberry around here, that you would see in the woods. They get the little white berries on them here and there. But these are kind of man-made versions of that. So you can see by that picture, extreme amount of berries on them. This is one that'll bloom like July, early August. The bees will go crazy on it in the landscape because they bloom very heavy. And then I'll have a sea of either white or pink berries on it, depending on the variety I choose. So kind of a nice plant again for that midsummer, late summer, and then fall into winter with all those cool berries on them as we grow. So if I want white, I would buy one called Galaxy. If I want pink, I would buy one called Candy. They make it real easy with those two names these days. I love Summer Sweet. That's another plant for me I wish we sold more of because I think it's pretty useful up here. Summer Sweet's going to bloom midsummer. Great fragrance on it again. I can do whites, pinks, different tones of those. And this is another one that will take some wet. It'll take some dry. It'll take just about everywhere you got in the yard if you're looking for a little bit larger shrub. That's another favorite of the pollinators and the bees around here as these start to bloom in a little bit later in the season. Now, just I'll whip through here a few foliage shrubs, you know, because to me, flowers are awesome. I'm not an anti-flower guy at all. I enjoy all the flowers in my yard as they come on the shrubs. But what's left when they're done blooming? What do I have to look at in spring? Do I have bright purples, yellows, different colors in the yard? We have so much green around here in Washington, which I wouldn't trade for anything because we got rain all the time. But we have a lot of green, and if you can find some of these shrubs that you like to give you a good flower and give you some nice colorful foliage, they're really going to pop in the yard as we go through the different seasons. So everything from variegated, bright yellows, oranges, there's a lot of options we'll whip through here. So yes, barberry has little thorns on it, but it doesn't mean that we don't have to have barberry in our yard. There's some fabulous barberries out there. They take a lot of sun. They're really easy to prune. They do flower in spring, which is nice, but some great foliage. I've got a number of different barberries. If you're like me with young children, you can put a little bit underneath the bedroom window and they're never going to get out of the house that way. It'll get a little spike on it. My sons will have that underneath their window here pretty quick. We got some evergreen stuff. Boxwoods, you know, nothing simpler than boxwood. You know, if you just want green, easy to clip, it's fine to get boxwood. There's nothing wrong with having boxwood in the yard. I hear a lot of people still like boxwood. Japanese hollies are very close to that, where I have the same look. Maybe I don't have to get quite as formal if you like them a little bit more natural, but there's some great Japanese hollies to grow. Small, dark green leaves, easy to grow. Even a yellow one like that one. It's got a little yellow splash on it called Drops of Gold. We've got things like elderberries. You know, I have a couple of elderberries in my landscape. Black foliage, green foliage, variegated foliage, cut leaves, large leaves. We've got some nice variety in elderberries and a nice flower as well. But I could have an elderberry kind of as a nice specimen. You know, the one there, black lace, It'll get big if you don't prune it. That would be almost like a little small tree or large shrub that would make quite a statement in the yard. Lots of great foliage stuff in the evergreens. We love this osmanthus party lights. That is a real picture. That does come out green, white, and light pink. I mean, that's a real picture. I haven't photoshopped that one at all. That's one you'll get some really colorful leaves on a nice little evergreen that I can clip if I want. They call that false holly. It's not quite as prickly as holly is, and it doesn't get the berries on it, so we don't have the little seedlings as presents from the birds all the time. There's lots of cool excuse me, osmanthus out there. Party lights would be the pink. We get a couple other ones as well. If you don't like pink, you like a little darker coppery foliage or purple new growth. Lots of options for osmanthus. Euonymus, always my question is what's the plural of euonymus? Would it be euonymi? That's what I want to know. Someday I'm going to figure that out. So euonymuses, we'll call it for now. There's lots of fun euonymus for full sun, super drought tolerant, and this is probably one of the most versatile shrubs. I love selling people euonymus because I think it's colorful, I think it's easy, you don't have a lot of maintenance on it. But I could pick euonymus from, you know, a foot tall to 2 foot tall to 3 foot tall, or I have other ones in my yard that grow 6 feet tall that are very prunable. So we can pick a wide variety of size on euonymus and great sun tolerance and great foliage color. That's a sweet plant to pop with a lot of the greens. Twig dogwoods, you know, another native thing we have around here. Instead of having red twig with green leaves or yellow twig with green leaves, we've got options that we can plant that have variegated foliage or bright yellow foliage. Interest in the landscape. So if you know twig dogwoods, they take wet, they take easy, they take abuse. You can mow them down, they'll grow again. An easy plant to grow, but certainly you could take some of these options as one that looks very attractive in the yard with the foliage color. Dappled willow gives me pinks, whites, greens. If you haven't tried the willow shrub, again, we'll take a little bit of wet. This is one we go through a lot of here in April, May, June because of the leaf color. It's got fabulous pastel foliage that's very prunable in the landscape as well. On the right there, maybe is one you haven't seen as much, Distilium. So that's a plant that blooms in the winter that's evergreen. I like using it as a laurel substitute. If you don't like laurel a lot, whether it's the low autoleucon laurel or a hedge type laurel, this is one that we could get a pretty good hedge out of and have some nice colorful leaves without all the disease issues sometimes that laurel gets. So maybe look at a Distilium or two. That's kind of a fun little different plant. Lots of smoke trees, gold smoke trees, purple smoke trees. You say smoke bush, I say smoke tree, or vice versa. You tell that one what to do by your pruning. So we could let that get into a nice little tree or keep it pruned and enjoy a much smaller plant that has the colorful leaves. They do get the little puffs of smoke flower on them, which are nice, but that's a plant I would grow just for the colorful foliage. That's got sweet, sweet leaves on it. You might try, if you don't want big, I would tell you to look out there for a couple of dwarf ones. We get a purple one in called Lila that might get 4 or 5 feet tall is all, and we get even a smaller one called Velvetini, and that would be on like a 2 or a 3 foot smoke tree with the purple leaves. Okay? Lots of cool 9-barks. Somebody asked me about that before class. You know, I have 1, 2, 3 9-barks now in different areas of my yard because I think that matches everything to me. Cool bark in the winter that peels. I get great foliage color all through the season, and I get that nice little bloom on there too later in spring with a little red seed head on there afterwards. So we can do dwarfish ones, maybe 4 or 5 feet tall, or we can do larger ones that might get 6 or 8 feet tall, kind of depending on what your size that you're looking for. But I have both those in my yard. The Amber Jubilee is one of my favorite ones. I love orangey gold foliage, and that one's just leafing out in my garden. That's one of my favorite spring plants. That would be a picture like now here in April, May. We can do almost a dark black purple too if you like a little fireside. Nandinas are very easy to grow again, drought tolerant. They call these heavenly bamboo. They have nothing to do with bamboo. They don't spread like bamboo. They're not bamboo. Wish they changed the name. Just call them Nandinas. So Nandina's one I could pick red new growth, kind of coppery earth tone new growth, a bunch of different colors on those. They're very prunable, super drought tolerant, and really easy. This is a plant I think a lot of gardeners could use in a sunny landscape where they just want a little shrub, some evergreen, and maybe not have to mess with it too much. If we look at a few shade things here last, so if we go into the shade side of foliage, you could go down and peek at a lot of the different colors down there. Big leaves, small leaves, but a lot of variegation and a lot of statement plants to me. If I've got deep dark shade, I would hope you want some color. You know, something with some gold, some white, something that's going to brighten up that garden instead of just more dark green because it's already dark again. So if we look at plants like Akuba, that's going to have big foliage. I could do like peat bush, you know, flecked yellow like that one's picturata. We can do bold streaks of yellow on it. We can also do green if you like just green. But that's a big plant that we could use for a specimen all the way to deep dark shade. So that doesn't need really any sunlight at all. And that's a plant that's super drought tolerant too. So dry shade is an option with Akuba. Love boxwoods. Very simple again, but boxwood, Japanese hollies, a few things like that will grow pretty much in good shade as well. And maybe we don't want green, but we want variegated boxwood or something that's got a little bit of color on it too. Distilium, you saw both. You know, that's another one of those plants that I would call bulletproof. You know, I can grow that in sun, I grow it in shade, I can dry it, I can get it a little wet. It grows just about everywhere. But Distilium maybe might be an option for a foliagey colored shrub that we could use in our partial shade garden that would give me a little bit of foliage color. You saw the heavenly bamboo in the sun. This particular one called Twilight would do well in shade. If we had that in sun, we'd get a little burnt in the summertime because that's got white and pink new foliage. That's another plant that's got some pretty cool leaves for that part shade garden that is drought tolerant as well and evergreen. You'll see the Japanese holly, box honeysuckle there. You know, a couple simple evergreen shrubs that I need to eat up some area, get some ground cover, so I got less weeding, right? But I just want some good foundation plants. Japanese holly does just as well on the shadier side of the yard as it would in the sun. Box honeysuckle, if you haven't tried it, it's another one I like to use a lot in my own yard. Variegated leaves, green leaves. I've got some choices on there, but it's a great filler plant. I can clip it if I want, but if I let it go, I'm going to have some kind of interesting arching branches to it as well, if you like kind of a little more native yard. This one here, again, I don't think a lot of people see Diarvelia. This is a plant, we have both these colors in now, but this is deciduous, so nothing in the winter. But right now, this isn't fall. These are leafing out with those colors here come spring. So it's in kind of the honeysuckle family. We get a little bit of yellow flower on the wood, but I can pick red foliage, orange foliage. I can pick some different colors I want. And then I've got, again, a nice attractive foliage plant through the entire season till fall. Big old Fatsia. We got a whole bunch. I'm waiting for more of that camouflage here we'll have again, but we got a whole bunch of spider web in finally. You know, if I've got deep, dark shade and I want to make a statement, you probably want to look at getting a Fatsia. You know, that's a big, impressive evergreen plant. Looks very tropical, but they're very hardy. Sometimes we get nipped a little bit in the winter. We saw it off, and here it comes again. A really easy plant to grow up here. If you walked down the Smith house here on the nursery property, you'll see 3 or 4 huge old Fatsias. Steve loved big foliage, so he planted a bunch of those years ago. And you can see an old camouflage, an old spider web, a few different varieties over there. So maybe, if you've got deep, dark shade, you're looking to make a statement with a big leafed evergreen, the Fatsia might be a great choice for you. And last one here for shade is the Mahonias again. Now, we talked a little bit earlier about some Oregon grape, right? You know, we've got native Oregon grape. There's nothing wrong with any of those. We've got low ones. We've got a little bit taller ones. What I mean by Mahonia hybrids is a lot of the big, tall, crossed varieties. A lot of these come from Asia or different continents, so they have the same Mahonia flowers, that our hummingbirds and pollinators will enjoy as they bloom. But a lot of these are going to flower November, December, January, February. So in the peak of the winter, when nothing's flowering, this one would be in bloom for you. And they've got pretty big, impressive structure and foliage to them. I've got a few out here still. You can see all the berries on them, like our Oregon grape would have, but because they finished blooming. But very large, almost again tropical-ish foliage would make a nice specimen, I think, for a lot of people that have a part shade garden. Last one of there is osmanthus. So again, we saw party lights earlier, and that could grow in sun or some part shade as well. This would be the same way with goshiki. Maybe I don't like pink. I like a little more creamy white or copper colors on new growth. You can see from the amount of variegation on that foliage, that's a really pretty shrub. Would never care if it even blooms. I've got a nice attractive growth habit and some pretty foliage on there to enjoy. Okay? So that's a lot of shrubs in 55 minutes. So you can always find a lot of this stuff on our website as well. We have spend a lot of time on our website. Myself and Nicole getting everything dialed in for the year. You'll find everything from rhodie list to Japanese maple list from yesterday to a lot of shrub options on there as well, depending on your needs. You can always check that out. If you had the handout here, we've got this online if you lose it, but you can kind of scan through here because I list quite a bit of the different shrubs and options with quick little descriptions, and then everybody's got a fancy phone or the computer these days. You can go on there and say, oh, I like the idea of that mountain laurel. That flower looks really cool. What are my choices? You know, and you'll probably get overwhelmed by the number of options out there as far as colors. We get as much as we can on a lot of things, but you're always more than welcome to email us or call or let me or the staff know if you want to get on the wish list for something. Boy, I like the mountain laurel, but why don't you ever get this one in? Can you find it for me? And it's never a promise from us or an obligation that you're gonna buy it if I ever get it. It's always an open door. But it's something just to let us know what you guys want. You're our customers. You're the important thing, so we can try to find some new varieties if you are looking for them, okay? So ask away. You got any questions? That's a lot of shrubs to talk about in a pretty quick time. And that's certainly not all of them out there. You know, we've got pretty much most everything in, but there's still stuff trickling in here. Everything seems to be a little late this year with the weather, A. But B, not to blame anything on COVID, but it's a little harder in shrubs than perennials and annuals and things. I can make a perennial pretty quickly. When I lack staff for a couple years, some things don't get propagated, some things don't get started, and there's some gaps here and there on sizes of things that we normally would have, and certainly on some varieties as well. So if there's something that caught your eye, you know, let us know. If we don't have it in yet, we'll call and let you know when we do get it in, because there's still a lot of material to show up, especially for the summer shrubs. We've barely dipped into hydrangeas yet, and if you're down here in a month or 6 weeks, half the nursery's filled with hydrangeas, so we get a lot of those in. So, all right, so we got any questions? Yes?
What's the height range on the mountain laurel?
So that's a great question. She asked mountain laurel, what's the height range? There are some dwarf ones available, and we do have a couple out there, so maybe we're like 2 or 3 feet on those. Typical Calmia or mountain laurel, you're probably looking at 4 or 5 feet on most all of them. Yeah. Yeah. Yes?
Best shrub for that size pot?
For that size pot, do you have sun or shade?
They can go anywhere.
We put the pot. That's the nice thing about pots that are mobile. You can put them anywhere you want, right? Boy, that's a great question, but there'd be too many answers to that.
It's a white pot.
It's a white pot. Well, and everything pops with white too. Probably not anything yellow, because I don't know. That's the one thing I don't like. Usually, is yellow white mixed together. Oh boy, why don't you grab me after? I'll show you quite a few, because I think we could do just about anything in a container. We could grow any plant in a pot, right? Yeah. Yes.
Drought location that you keep about 3 feet tall.
About 3 feet tall for sun?
Drought. Oh, I'm sorry. Shade.
For shade, drought?
Shade.
Okay. So there are some good drought tolerant stuff. For sure, I'd look at some of the native stuff, like Mountain Mahonia, Oregon grape would be a great choice. I don't think you'll ever lose with Sarcococa and drought, that sweet box. And we don't, with the thing I didn't mention with Sarcococa, it just finished blooming, but it's still great green all through the season. I can pick like literally foot and a half. I can pick 3 feet, or I can pick like 5 or 6 feet. So you would want to get Sarcococa confusa is kind of the middle one, and I have a bunch down there still. That would be a great choice for you.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Fatsia?
Fatsia.
I have Fatsia in a pot.
Uh-huh.
It looks really crappy after
Okay.
the
Yeah.
winter.
Cut it back. Don't be bashful. Yeah, I mean, mine literally, mine at my house I already cut back. My in-laws have 2 monster ones, and I chopped them in half last week.
I mean, what do
You,
said cut
you,
them
you
back.
can literally cut those stalks down to wherever you want to, and they will just start, and they'll, here comes another crown, and off we go again. So put some food on them, you know, and again, give it a little patience. It's not going to happen in a week, but if you've got a tattered fatsia coming out of winter, we can really cut those things back and start them over again.
By the way, I have probably half of these shrubs in pots.
Nice.
So,
See? I got a lot in the ground, but I got too many pots too, so there you go. Yeah.
Trevor, I bought some Nandina that were in the front of the house, or the burgundy Nandinas.
Yep.
They're such a nice lacy shrub
Yep,
that
yep.
I've been afraid to do much pruning.
Yep.
So would you do kind of like the pruner?
A little
method?
bit here and there. Well, it's a great question because everyone in here, she asked about pruning things like Nandina and stuff because they do have nice leaves.
Yeah.
The hardest thing with pruning is you just have to try to avoid cutting into bare wood. So if I lightly clip them every year or cut a few inches off, you're never going to hurt the plant. If I go in half, I think you're crossing your fingers and toes, and hopefully it comes back quite nicely because some things won't if I cut them back that hard. So we can always pull a piece here and there or tidy them up a little bit, but we're never going to let it grow for 5 years and then, oh, I want to go back to the way it was. Then we got problems.
Okay.
Yeah. Got any more? Yes.
Soil conditions for Fatsia.
So Fatsia doesn't mind some dry shade. You don't want clay. I wouldn't maybe call it drought tolerant, but it doesn't need an extravagant amount of water. It looks like it should, but it really doesn't. But if you've got decent drainage, even maybe on the dry side, Fatsia will grow. I mean, that's all the way to like deep, dark, no sunlight, which is a common spot up here in most yards if you got some shade. So you'll see like on ours, they are literally on the north side of the house over there. They get 0 light whatsoever, especially with everything else growing out over them, and they thrive there. Yeah, really, really easy.
If I have clay soil, can I amend it with compost?
You can, you know, break up that hard pan layer, really get some compost mixed in there, and you'll still be okay. Yeah, you'll be fine with that. Yeah. Yes.
Got a hypericum in a pot.
Yep.
And it's looking like
Dead.
it's not quite coming back
Yeah.
to life.
Yeah.
Should I prune it back or just give it a minute?
Wait a little bit, because you know, we don't heat our greenhouses here, but like I had 10 or 12 left from the winter, and they were back in one of our cold frames, which gets a little warmer earlier than you would in the yard, and literally just like leafing out on the trunk right now. What I would do, because Hypericum's super hardy, it's not a temperature thing, but you might have to cut the wood back a little bit, which you probably should anyway on those shrubby Hypericums. Take your fingernail, your pruners, and just nick the wood here and there. I bet you it's plenty green, and just give it a little bit and it'll get going. And there's some things like, that's one, Rosa Sharon we talked about. You know, I drove by my Rosa Sharon, you would think it's dead as a doornail in my front yard on the city bank. It just leaves out later. There's some things that are just a little bit longer to leaf out. We got lots of dead-looking hydrangeas out there still that are just leafing out too, so there you go. So, like I said, I know it's raining today. Just keep in mind, the Rhodea azalea thing is sweet, you know, at 30%. So if you want to grab one, we got umbrellas if you want a quick dash and grab something. All the shrubs are 20% off for you guys for coming to the class. So whether you shop today or you're like, I think I'll watch the weather, and like he said, it might be nicer on Wednesday or Thursday or Friday. You got all the way through next Friday to come down and shop. You just tell the folks at the cashier you were at Trevor's boring shrub class last Sunday, and you got 20% on your shrub purchases. Now, I'll say this, because this is always a tough class. What's a shrub? You could probably convince me that most things are shrubs around here. And even if it's not automatically 20%, I'll be like, all right, give her 20% on those two. So, I mean, this is roses, hydrangeas, rhodies, azaleas, deciduous, evergreens. It's probably half the property. So take advantage of the sale. It's a great discount. All right?
Thank you.
So thanks for coming. Yeah, appreciate it.